The rain had started 3 hours before the ceremony, and now it drummed against the stone courtyard like 1,000 impatient fingers. I stood at the very back of the gathered crowd, my thin cloak doing little against the cold that seeped through fabric and skin alike. Around me, the pack members pressed closer to the raised platform, where the Lycan King would present his son to the realm. A ritual as old as the bloodlines themselves. I didn't belong here. Not really. The whispers had followed me since childhood, soft and cutting as winter wind, half-blood, weakling, human-tainted. My mother had been pack, but my father, well, no one spoke his name anymore. All I inherited from him was pale blonde hair that caught moonlight wrong, and a frame too delicate for a world built on strength. The other women stood tall and proud, their dark hair gleaming, their bodies testimony to generations of pure Lycan blood. I was a shadow among monuments. "Move aside," someone hissed, elbowing past me. I stumbled but caught myself, keeping my eyes down. It was easier that way. Easier to be invisible than to face the disdain in their eyes. The crowd shifted, a collective intake of breath, and I looked up despite myself. He stood on the platform like carved granite come to life. Ronan Ashford, the Lycan King. Even from this distance, his presence was overwhelming, a gravitational pull that made the air feel heavier. His dark hair was pulled back severely, revealing a face that might have been handsome if not for the brutal scar that ran from temple to jaw. They said he'd gotten it defending the northern territories. They said he'd killed 20 rogues that night with his bare hands. They said a lot of things about Ronan Ashford. In his arms, wrapped in ceremonial furs despite the autumn warmth, was a bundle so small it seemed impossible. His son. 4 months old and already the center of a world I barely understood. The baby's mother had died in childbirth. Another whisper that traveled through the pack like smoke. Cursed. Tragic. The king's heart died with her. I watched as Ronan lifted the child higher, his expression unreadable as stone. The baby made a small sound, and something flickered across the king's face. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Grief, maybe, or fear wearing grief's mask. "By blood and bone, I present my heir," Ronan's voice carried across the courtyard, deep and resonant. "Heir to the Ashford line, future king of the northern packs." The crowd erupted in ceremonial howls, the sound raising goosebumps along my arms. I remained silent, my human throat incapable of producing that primal music. Another way I didn't fit. As the ceremony continued, I felt it. That prickling awareness that crawls up your spine when you're being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the edges of the crowd, the shadows between buildings. Nothing. Just rain and stone and the press of bodies around me. But the feeling didn't fade. My father, before he'd left, had told me something I'd never forgotten. "Trust your instincts, little one. They're sharper than you know." He'd been human, but he'd understood the supernatural world in ways that frightened my mother. She'd forbidden him from filling my head with dangerous nonsense, but some lessons sink deeper than prohibition. The ceremony was ending. Ronan descended from the platform, his elite guard forming a protective circle around him and the child. They would process through the courtyard to the great hall where the feast waited. I should leave now, slip away before the crowd dispersed and left me exposed. I was turning to go when the air changed. It happened so fast that later, when I tried to remember, the details scattered like startled birds. A disturbance near the east wall, shouts, the metallic scent of fear cutting through rain and wet stone. The crowd surged, people trying to see or flee or both at once. I was pushed forward, stumbling, suddenly much closer to the platform than I'd ever intended to be. That's when I saw them. 3 figures, dark and impossibly fast, moving through the panicking crowd like wolves through sheep. No, not like wolves. Something else. Something wrong. Their movements were too fluid, too predatory, and the guards who tried to intercept them fell back clutching wounds that steamed in the cold air. Rogues. Had to be, but rogues didn't move like that, didn't smell like that. A scent of decay and dark magic that made my stomach clench. One of them had broken through the guard's perimeter, was heading straight for Ronan, who had turned his body to shield his son, his free hand already shifting into something between human and beast. I should run. Every survival instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I watched in frozen horror as the attacker's hand rose, something glinting in their grasp. Not a blade. Arrows. 4 of them held between fingers like impossible claws, points already dripping with substance too dark to be rain, time stretched, taffy thin and terrible. Ronan couldn't shift fully, not while holding his son. The baby was crying now, thin wails cutting through chaos. The nearest guard was too far away, still grappling with another attacker. Everyone was too far away. Everyone except me. I didn't think. Thinking would have stopped me, reminded me of my place, my weakness, my absolute insignificance in this moment. Instead, I moved. My legs carried me forward in a stumbling run. I wasn't fast, would never be fast like them, but I was close, and close was enough. The attacker's arm drew back, those poison-tipped arrows aimed at the small bundle in the king's arms. I threw myself between them. The first arrow hit my shoulder, punching through muscle and tendon with surprising ease. The pain was white-hot, immediate, stealing my breath. The second followed a heartbeat later, lower, near my ribs. I felt it scrape bone. I was falling. The world tilting sideways, but my body still served as a shield. The third arrow caught me in the thigh, and the fourth embedded itself in my upper back as I crumpled. Through dimming vision, I saw Ronan's face above me. His eyes, ice blue and wide with something that might have been shock, were the last clear thing I registered before the poison hit my bloodstream. It burned. Not like fire. Fire was clean, hungry, purposeful. This was corruption, spreading through my veins like rot through wood. I tried to scream but couldn't find the air. My body convulsed, and distantly I heard shouting, felt hands on me, but it all seemed to happen to someone else. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the baby, safe in his father's arms, his small face turned toward me as if he knew, as if he understood what I'd given. Then nothing. Nothing but the dark, and the poison, and the distant sound of my own heartbeat growing slower. Slower. I woke to whiteness. Not the clean white of snow or moonlight, but the sterile, suffocating white of the healing ward. The ceiling above me was crossed with dark wooden beams, and I stared at them for a long time, trying to remember how to make my body work. Everything felt distant, wrapped in thick wool. Pain came next. Not the searing agony of the arrows, but a deep bone-level ache that radiated from 4 distinct points across my body. I tried to move my arm and immediately regretted it, biting back a whimper. Don't. A voice, female and firm. Footsteps approached, and a face appeared above me, middle-aged, stern, with the no-nonsense expression of someone who'd seen too much suffering to coddle anyone through it. You'll tear the stitches. Though honestly, girl, stitches are the least of your problems. Healer Margot. I recognized her from the few times I'd been permitted in the main compound for mandatory pack gatherings. She'd never spoken to me before. Half-bloods usually dealt with the apprentice healers, if we were treated at all. The baby? My voice came out as broken glass, scraping my throat raw. Something flickered across Margot's face. Surprise, maybe. The prince is fine, unharmed. She began checking the bandages on my shoulder, her hands surprisingly gentle despite her harsh tone, which is more than I can say for you. 4 arrows, all poisoned with something I've never seen before. Dark magic, mixed with silver and nightshade. Should have killed you in minutes. Should have. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your fever finally broke this morning. She moved to examine the wound on my back, and I felt her pause. I don't understand it. Your human blood should have made you more vulnerable to the poison, not less. But something in you fought it, burned it out slowly. 3 days. I tried to process that, but my thoughts moved like honey in winter. The attackers, I managed. Dead. All 3 of them. The king. She hesitated, an unusual show of uncertainty. The king dealt with them personally. What was left wasn't pretty. She finished her examination and moved around to face me again. You're going to have scars. Bad ones. The shoulder wound damaged muscle. You may never regain full strength in that arm. I almost laughed. Full strength. as if I'd had any to begin with. "Can I leave?" Margot's expression hardened. "Leave? Girl, you can barely lift your head. You'll stay here until I say otherwise." She paused, seemed to wrestle with something. "Besides, there are complications." Before I could ask what that meant, the door to the healing ward opened. The temperature in the room dropped. I couldn't see the doorway from my bed, but I felt his presence like pressure against my skin. Heavy boots crossed the stone floor, measured and deliberate. Margot immediately bowed her head, stepping back to give him space. Ronan Ashford appeared in my line of vision, and every instinct I had screamed at me to look away, to make myself smaller, but I couldn't move, could barely breathe as he stood there studying me with those ice-blue eyes. He looked different up close. The scar was more brutal, cutting through what might have once been classical handsomeness and rendering it into something starker. Dangerous. His shoulders were impossibly broad beneath the dark coat he wore, and his hands, one of which rested on the pommel of a blade at his hip, were scarred and powerful. "Leave us." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Margot bowed again and practically fled. The silence stretched. I forced myself to meet his gaze, though it cost me. My father's voice echoed in my memory. "Never show your throat to a predator unless you mean to submit. What's your name?" His voice was quieter than it had been during the ceremony, but no less commanding. "Elena." It came out steadier than I expected. "Elena Thorne." "Thorne." He repeated it as if testing the weight. "William Thorne's daughter." My stomach clenched. No one spoke my father's name, ever. "Yes." Something shifted in his expression, too subtle to read. "Your father once did me a service. A long time ago, before he left the territory, he moved closer, and I realized he was holding something, a small bundle of cloth. He helped me track a rogue pack that had taken hostages, used his human skills, tracking, strategy, things we'd overlooked in our reliance on instinct. He saved lives that night. I hadn't known that. My mother had refused to speak of him, and the pack treated his name like a curse. I didn't know you could be saved," Ronan continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "Margot said the poison should have killed you. Said your human blood should have made you weaker." He paused. She was wrong. He set the bundle on the table beside my bed, began unwrapping it. 4 arrows, their points still dark with dried poison. I stared at them, my body remembering the impact, the burn. "Do you know what these are?" he asked. I shook my head, immediately regretted the movement as pain lanced through my skull. Cursed weapons, crafted specifically to kill lichens. The poison is designed to attack our healing abilities, to turn our own strength against us. His jaw tightened. If even one had hit my son, he would have died in agony within the hour. 4 would have killed him in minutes. The weight of those words settled over the room. You threw yourself in front of them. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. Why? The question hung between us, demanding truth. I searched for an answer that would make sense to him. Duty, honor, loyalty to the pack that barely tolerated me, but lying to the Lichen King seemed both pointless and dangerous. I don't know, I admitted. I saw him, your son, and I just moved. There wasn't time to think. Ronan stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and did something that stopped my heart. He touched my face, his palm rough against my cheek, tilting my head so I had to meet his eyes fully. You saved my son's life, he said quietly. With your own body, knowing it would kill you. A half-blood girl the pack treats like dirt threw herself in front of poisoned arrows meant for my heir. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, the gesture almost tender. Do you understand what that means? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. It means you belong to me now. His voice was soft but absolute. Life debt. It's old law. Older than the pack structures. Older than the territories. You saved my son. Your life is now bound to this house, to my bloodline. Do you understand? Horror and something else, something I couldn't name, twisted in my chest. I don't want... It's not a choice. His hand dropped from my face, for either of us. The debt is binding. You'll be moved from wherever you've been living to the royal compound. You'll be under my protection, my authority. He straightened, and I saw the king again, not the man. And you'll be trained. If you're going to throw yourself in front of weapons, you'll learn to survive it properly. I can barely fight. My human blood. Your human blood kept you alive when Lycan's strength would have failed. His tone was sharp. Stop using it as an excuse for weakness. Your father never did. The words hit like a slap, stunning me into silence. Ronan moved toward the door, then paused. The pack will know what you did, how you saved the prince. Some will respect you for it. His hand rested on the door frame. Others will hate you more than ever. Power shifts create enemies, Elena Thorne. Be ready for that. He left without waiting for a response, the door closing with soft finality. I lay there in the white room, my body aching, my mind reeling. Through the narrow window, I could see the sun setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Everything had changed. 3 days ago, I'd been invisible, forgettable, safe in my insignificance. Now I belonged to the Lycan king, bound by ancient law to the most powerful and most dangerous man in the territory. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about what that meant. Tried not to wonder why his touch had felt like both a brand and a promise. The royal compound sat on the highest point of the territory, a fortress of gray stone and dark timber that seemed to grow from the mountain itself. I'd only ever seen it from a distance, a place for purebloods, for warriors, for those who mattered. Now, 2 weeks after waking in the healing ward, I stood at its gates with nothing but the clothes on my back and 4 healing scars that pulled with every breath. Margot had released me that morning with a list of restrictions longer than my arm and a look that said she expected me back in her ward within a week. The shoulder wound was healing poorly, the muscle reluctant to knit properly. My limp from the thigh wound was pronounced, though she promised it would fade with time. The other 2 would leave marks, but little else. You're expected in the east wing. The guard at the gate, a massive man with gray threading his dark hair, barely looked at me. 3rd floor. Someone will show you. I climbed the steps slowly, my leg protesting each rise. The compound was enormous, all sharp angles and defensive architecture. Lycans moved through the corridors with purpose, barely sparing me a glance. I caught whispers, though, trailing me like smoke. That's her. The half-blood who took the arrows. Heard she can barely walk now. Pathetic. The king's lost his mind, bringing her here. I kept my eyes forward, my spine straight despite the pain. My father's voice again. Let them talk. Words are wind. Action is truth. The east wing was quieter, the corridors lined with doors that stayed closed. A young woman in servant's clothing waited at the top of the stairs, her expression carefully neutral. Elena Thorne? At my nod, she continued. I'm Iris. I'll show you to your quarters. She started walking, her pace mercifully slow. You'll share the floor with other members of the household staff. Meals are served in the lower hall at dawn, midday, and dusk. You're expected to attend training sessions each morning in the yard, though healer Margot sent word you're to start with physical conditioning only. No combat, until your wounds are fully healed. Training. The word sat heavy in my stomach. Iris stopped at a door near the end of the corridor, pushed it open. This is yours. The room was small but clean, a bed, a desk, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the training yards. Compared to the cramped corner I'd occupied in the pack's lower housing, it was palatial. Thank you, I said quietly. Iris hesitated at the door. The pack isn't happy about you being here. The purebloods especially. Her tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. Watch yourself. Life dead or not, accidents happen. She left me alone with that cheerful warning. I moved to the window, watched the figures below going through combat drills. They moved like water, like violence given grace. I would never move like that. My body had always been my limitation. And now, marked by poison and punctured by arrows, it was even more of a cage. A knock at the door pulled me from dark thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting Iris with more instructions. The door opened to reveal a woman who made the air feel thinner just by existing. She was tall, with the kind of beauty that came from perfect genetics and absolute confidence. Dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her amber eyes, pure lichen, fixed on me with barely concealed contempt. "So you're the charity case." Her voice was cultured, sharp. I wanted to see for myself what kind of creature throws itself in front of arrows. I said nothing, waiting. She circled the room slowly, examining it like one might examine a disappointing purchase. "My name is Sienna Blackthorn. My father leads the southern packs. I've been close to the king for years. Very close." The implication dripped from every word. "I was at the ceremony, saw what you did. Then I know you got lucky." She stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet her eyes. "I know the king feels obligated to keep you here because of some archaic law that should have died centuries ago. But obligation isn't respect, little half-blood, and it certainly isn't affection." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice level. "I never asked for this." "No?" Her smile was knife-sharp. "You just happened to be in the perfect position to play hero? How convenient. How very calculated." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But here's what you need to understand. The king needs a queen. Someone strong, pure-blooded, capable of giving him more heirs. Someone who can stand beside him in power." She straightened. "You are a temporary curiosity, a debt to be paid. Don't mistake his protection for anything more, or you'll find yourself broken in ways those arrows never managed." She left with the same predatory grace she'd arrived with, the door clicking shut behind her. I sat on the bed, my hands shaking. Not from fear, though there was that too, but from anger. The familiar, bitter anger of being told what I was, what I could never be, what I should accept. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the moon track across the sky and tried to silence the voice in my head that whispered, Sienna was right. Dawn came gray and cold. I dressed in the plain training clothes that had been left in the wardrobe. They hung loose on my frame, and made my way to the yards. At least 40 lichens were already there, moving through warm-up exercises. I recognized some faces from the ceremony, others from the pack gatherings I'd attended on the fringes. They all stopped when they saw me. The silence was deafening. "Well?" A voice barked from the front. A man built like a mountain, scars crisscrossing his bare arms. "You waiting for an invitation? Get in formation." I moved to the back, tried to fall into the stretches they were doing. My shoulder screamed in protest, my leg barely supporting my weight. Around me, I heard the whispers starting again, felt the weight of their judgment. Pathetic. She'll last a week. King's making a mistake. Enough. The command cut through the murmurs like a blade. Everyone snapped to attention. Ronan stood at the edge of the yard, his presence radiating authority. He was dressed for training, simple dark clothing that emphasized the brutal efficiency of his build. His eyes swept the assembled fighters, stopping briefly on me before moving on. "You all know why she's here," he said, his voice carrying easily. "Life debt. Ancient law. Not my choice or hers, but binding nonetheless." He began walking along the line, his gaze sharp. "Some of you think she's weak, that her human blood makes her a liability." I felt every eye turn to me, burning. "You're right," Ronan continued. "She is weak. By our standards, she's fragile as glass." He stopped directly in front of me, and I forced myself to meet his gaze. "But she did something not one of you had the courage to do. She put her body between my son and death. While you stood frozen, while my own guards were too far away, this half-blood girl made a choice." The silence was absolute now, so here's how this works. Ronan's tone went cold. "She trains, she learns, she becomes stronger, or she doesn't. That's her fight. But anyone who interferes with that, anyone who makes her path harder out of spite or prejudice, answers to me personally." He let that sink in. "Are we clear?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the group. Ronan's eyes met mine once more, something unreadable in their depths. "Don't make me regret this," he said quietly. Meant only for me. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in a yard full of people who now feared crossing me, but hated me all the more for it. The mountain of a man, Garrett, I learned, put us through drills that left me gasping. I couldn't keep up, couldn't match their strength or speed or endurance, but I didn't stop. Even when my leg gave out and I hit the ground hard, I got back up. Action is truth. By the time the session ended, I was shaking with exhaustion, my wounds weeping through the bandages. But I'd lasted. I'd stayed. As I limped toward the compound, someone fell into step beside me. A young man, maybe 20, with kind eyes and sandy hair. "That was impressive," he said. "I'm Callum. I just wanted to say, what you did at the ceremony, that took guts." I looked at him warily, waiting for the insult to follow. "It didn't. Most of them won't admit it," Callum continued. "But you scared them. Seeing someone so," he searched for a word, "breakable do something that brave. It raises uncomfortable questions about their own courage." "I wasn't brave," I said quietly. "I was just there. Maybe." He smiled. "Or maybe bravery is just doing the right thing when you're the only one who can, even when you're terrified." He left me at the entrance to the east wing, and I climbed the stairs slowly, my body screaming. In my room, I peeled off the training clothes and examined the damage in the small mirror. The bandages were spotted with blood, my skin mottled with bruises. I looked like something barely surviving, but I was surviving, and tomorrow, I'd do it again. 6 weeks changed everything and nothing. My body adapted slowly, grudgingly. The limp faded to a hitch in my step, noticeable only when I was tired. My shoulder remained weak, but I learned to compensate, to use my left side differently. Margot watched my progress with something approaching approval, though she'd never admit it aloud. The training was relentless. Garrett, who I learned was the master of arms, pushed me harder than anyone else, as if determined to either forge me into something useful or break me trying. I suspected he didn't care which outcome prevailed, but I didn't break. Callum became an unexpected ally. He'd train with me after the regular sessions, showing me techniques that relied on speed and precision rather than brute strength. "You'll never overpower them," he said one evening as we worked through defensive stances, "so don't try. Be smarter. Be faster where it counts." Others began to watch with grudging curiosity. I wasn't improving quickly. My human limitations saw to that. But I was improving. And I never quit, never complained, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing me surrender. Sienna remained a constant shadow, her presence a reminder of everything I wasn't. I'd see her entering Ronan's private quarters, leaving at dawn with satisfaction written across her perfect features. She'd smile at me in passing, those amber eyes promising violence wrapped in silk. I learned to smile back, learned to wear my own armor of indifference. Ronan himself was a ghost. I'd see him in the yards occasionally, watching the training with that unreadable expression. Once, he'd corrected my stance personally, his hands on my shoulders adjusting my position, his breath warm against my ear as he explained leverage and balance. The touch had lasted maybe 10 seconds. I'd thought about it for days, hating myself for it. He owed me nothing beyond the protection he'd promised. I knew that. Understood it. Understanding didn't stop the way my pulse jumped when he entered a room. It was late autumn when everything shifted again. I was in the library, a vast room of dark wood and ancient texts that I'd discovered during a sleepless night. The Pack's history lived in these books, stories written in languages both familiar and strange. I'd been reading about the old laws, trying to understand the life debt that bound me here. Most people find those texts impenetrably boring. I jumped, nearly dropping the heavy volume. Ronan stood in the doorway, still dressed from the evening council meeting, his formal coat emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders. "I wanted to understand," I said, finding my voice. "The debt, what it means." He moved into the room, his footsteps silent despite his size. "And what have you learned? That it's more complex than I thought." I set the book down carefully. The saved life becomes bound to the saver's bloodline. But it's not servitude. It's more like kinship. Protection in exchange for loyalty. "You've been reading the old texts, the original Lycan laws." He stopped at the window, looking out at the darkened grounds. "Most of those traditions have been simplified over the centuries, misunderstood. What does it actually mean?" I asked. "For me. For your son." Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. It means your pack, not the conditional acceptance you had before. It means your well-being matters to the bloodline you protected. It means... He turned to face me. It means I'm responsible for you. Your safety, your future, your happiness. All of it falls to me now. The weight of those words settled between us. I don't need happiness, I said quietly. Just purpose. Something more than being tolerated. Is that why you train so hard? Push yourself past the point of wisdom? His eyes were sharp. Margot tells me you're damaging your shoulder again. Refusing to rest. I have to keep up. You'll never keep up. It should have been cruel, but his tone was matter-of-fact. Your human blood sets limits that determination can't overcome. But that doesn't make you useless. Your father understood that, used his human traits as advantages. Patience, strategic thinking, the ability to move through human spaces undetected. He crossed the room, stopped close enough that I could smell leather and pine. You saved my son because you were in the right place, yes, but also because you noticed the threat when others didn't. Your instincts read the danger faster than Lycan senses. That's not weakness, Elena. That's a different kind of strength. I stared at him. Something tight in my chest, loosening. Then why does everyone treat it like a flaw? Because people fear what they don't understand. And you. His hand rose, hesitated, then brushed a strand of pale hair from my face. You don't fit their understanding. You never will. The touch lingered longer than necessary. His fingers traced the line of my jaw, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there feeling like the air had turned to lightning. Ronan! Sienna's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She stood in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. But I saw the fury burning beneath. The council needs you. Urgent news from the eastern borders. His hand dropped. The distance between us expanded instantly, professionally. I'll be there shortly. Sienna's eyes found mine, and the promise in them was clear. This isn't over. When they'd both left, I sank into the chair, my hands shaking. Whatever had almost happened, whatever that moment had been, it was dangerous. More dangerous than arrows, than poison, than anything I'd faced. Because part of me had wanted him to keep touching me. And that way led to destruction. The attack came 3 nights later. I was returning from evening training, exhausted and aching, when the scent hit me. Wrong. Unfamiliar. That same crawling awareness from the ceremony, amplified. I broke into a limping run, following instinct more than logic, and found myself at the nursery wing. The door stood open when it should have been guarded, locked. Inside I could hear struggle, growls, something breaking. The prince's room. I didn't have a weapon, hadn't earned the right to carry one, but there was a heavy iron candlestick in the corridor, and I grabbed it as I pushed through the door. The nursery was chaos. The guard lay crumpled against the wall, unconscious or worse. A figure, tall, unnaturally thin, stood over the prince's cradle, their hand reaching down. The same wrong scent from the ceremony. The same dark magic stench. I didn't think. Again. I swung the candlestick with everything I had, connecting with the intruder's skull. They staggered, turned toward me with a face that was human-shaped but fundamentally wrong. Dead eyes, skin like wax, mouth opening too wide, not rogue. Something worse. They lunged, and I fell back, swinging wildly. My shoulder screamed in protest, the old wound tearing. The candlestick connected again, and I was screaming, raw, wordless rage, as I kept them away from the cradle. Then the room exploded with bodies. Ronan hit the intruder like a force of nature, his partial shift making him something between man and wolf and nightmare. Others poured in. Garrett, Callum, more guards. The intruder fought with inhuman strength, but they were outnumbered. When it finally stopped moving, Ronan turned to me. I was on the floor, my shoulders soaked with blood, the candlestick still gripped in white-knuckled hands. The prince was crying, alive, unhurt, crying. Elena. Ronan's voice seemed to come from very far away. Let go. It's over. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't obey. He knelt in front of me, his hands covering mine, warm and solid. You're safe. He's safe. Let go. Finally, my fingers loosened. The candlestick clattered to the floor. Twice, Ronan said, his voice strange. Twice you've stood between my son and death. I wanted to respond, but the room was spinning. Blood loss, adrenaline crash, the shoulder wound completely reopened. I felt myself falling, felt his arms catch me. Get Margot. He barked at someone. Now. The last thing I remembered was his face above mine, those ice blue eyes holding something I couldn't name, something that looked almost like fear. I woke to firelight and the scent of medicinal herbs, not the healing ward, somewhere warmer, more intimate. My shoulder was bandaged tightly, the pain a dull throb rather than the sharp agony I'd expected. Someone had changed me into a soft nightgown, and I lay in a bed far too comfortable to be my own. You're awake. Ronan sat in a chair beside the bed, still wearing the blood-stained clothes from the attack. His hair had come loose from its tie, falling around his face in a way that made him look younger, more human. Exhausted. Where? My personal quarters. Margot said you needed somewhere quiet to recover, and the healing ward is, he gestured vaguely, busy, with questions I didn't want you facing yet. I tried to sit up, failed. He was there immediately, helping me, adjusting pillows behind my back with surprising gentleness. The prince? I asked. Asleep, unharmed. Thanks to you. Again, he settled back into the chair, his eyes never leaving my face. The thing you fought, we've identified it. A revenant. Corpse animated by dark magic, sent with a specific purpose. Someone is trying very hard to kill my son. The implications of that settled over us like frost. Twice now, you've been the only thing standing between him and death, Ronan continued. The first time I thought it was chance. Pure luck that you were there. But this... He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that seemed almost foreign on him. You were returning from training, exhausted. You should have gone to your room, collapsed into bed. Instead, you followed your instincts straight to the nursery. I smelled something wrong. Most Lycans didn't smell it. The revenant was masked with magic. But you, with your human senses, your human instincts, you caught it. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you understand what that means? You're not just lucky, Elena. You're connected to him somehow. The life debt created a bond that goes beyond simple obligation. I stared at him. That's not in the texts, because it's rare. So rare most people think it's myth. But when someone gives their life, truly gives it, expecting to die, to save another, sometimes the bond that forms is deeper than blood. Protective magic. Older than our kind. Older than the territories. His voice dropped. You're bound to my son's life force. You'll sense threats to him before anyone else. Feel when he's in danger. I'm his guardian, I whispered, the truth of it settling into my bones. Yes. Ronan's expression was complex, layered with things I couldn't parse, which makes you invaluable, and a target. Whoever is sending these assassins will eventually realize you're the obstacle. They'll come for you next. Let them. The words came out harder than I intended. I'm not afraid. You should be. He stood abruptly, moved to the window. I can protect you here, in the compound. But this creates complications. Sienna. He turned sharply. What about her? I shouldn't say it. Should keep my mouth shut. Play safe. But lying in this bed, wearing the evidence of violence, I was tired of being careful. She thinks I'm trying to take something that belongs to her. You. A position she believes she's earned. Sienna and I... He paused, choosing words carefully. There's history. An understanding. The pack expects me to choose a queen from the pure bloodlines, someone strong enough to stand as equal. She's been positioning herself for that role, and now I'm in the way. It wasn't a question. Ronan crossed back to the bed, sat on its edge this time, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. You're not in the way. He reached out, his hand cupping my face the way he had in the library. You're something I didn't expect, don't know how to categorize. You're infuriating and brave and completely unsuited for this world. And yet you fit into it in ways that terrify me. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. I can't offer you what Sienna wants. he continued, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. I can't promise you a crown or status or any of the things that matter in pack politics. My son needs a mother figure eventually, and you're bonded to him in ways I'm only beginning to understand. But beyond duty, beyond debt, his eyes searched mine. I don't know what this is, what you are to me. I'm nobody, I said, my voice breaking. A half-blood girl who got lucky twice. You're the woman who threw herself in front of arrows, who fought a revenant with a candlestick and won, who gets up every morning and faces a yard full of people who despise her and never stops trying. His hand slid into my hair, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. You're the woman who makes me question every assumption I've ever had about strength. He was going to kiss me. I could see the intention forming, feel the air between us charging with it. The door burst open. Garrett stood there, his expression grim. My lord, we have a situation. The council demands an emergency session. They've heard about the revenant, about the girl being in your quarters. Sienna's father is calling for... I'll be there shortly. Ronan's voice was pure ice. Garrett bowed and withdrew. The moment shattered like glass. Ronan stood, and I watched him transform, the vulnerability disappearing beneath layers of authority and control. By the time he reached the door, he was fully the Lycan King again. Rest, he said without turning. Margot will check on you. Don't leave these rooms until I return. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the dying fire and the echo of almost. 3 days passed in strange isolation. Margot came and went, changing my bandages and muttering about stubborn fools who didn't know when to stay down. Callum visited once, bringing books and news from the compound. The council is in an uproar, he told me quietly. Half of them want you elevated to an official position, royal guardian or something similar. The other half wants you expelled from the compound entirely. They're saying you're manipulating the situation, using the prince to gain influence. That's insane. Politics usually is. He offered a sympathetic smile. Ronan's fighting for you, but it's complicated. He needs the council's support, and Sienna's father commands significant influence. On the 4th day, Ronan returned. He looked like he'd aged years and days, the exhaustion carved deep into his features. But when he saw me, standing this time, testing my newly healed shoulder, something in his expression softened. You're recovering well. Margot says I'm too stubborn to die properly. I tried for lightness, failed. He moved closer, reached out, then seemed to think better of it. The council has agreed to a compromise. You'll be given an official title, Ward of the Crown Prince. You'll live in the royal wing, serve as his primary guardian and protector. It's an unprecedented position, but the attacks have made them amenable to unprecedented solutions. And Sienna has agreed to serve as my advisor on pack relations, a position of influence, but not... He trailed off. Not queen. No. He met my eyes. Not queen. I've made it clear that decision is mine alone, and I'm not ready to make it. May never be ready despite the council's pressure. We stood there in the firelight, the space between us charged with everything unsaid. You should know, Ronan continued. This position will make you more visible, more vulnerable. The enemy, whoever they are, will see you as an obstacle. They may come for you directly, I know. And you're still willing? I thought of the prince, small and helpless, and somehow bonded to my very soul. Thought of the life I'd had before, invisible and tolerated. Thought of the woman I was becoming, forged in fire and blood. Yes. Ronan closed the distance between us in 2 strides. This time, when he cupped my face, there was no hesitation. His mouth found mine in a kiss that was nothing like I'd imagined, harder, hungrier, tasting of desperation and need and something that might have been hope. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. This is a terrible idea, he said against my lips. Probably. The pack will be scandalized. The council will revolt. Sienna will want you dead. I know. He kissed me again, softer this time, his hands gentle as they cradled my face. I can't promise you easy, can't promise you safe, can't even promise you happy. I don't need promises, I whispered. I just need purpose. And maybe... I met his eyes, saw my own hope reflected there. Maybe someone to fight beside. You have that. His thumb traced my lower lip. You've had it since the moment you threw yourself in front of those arrows. I just needed time to understand what I was feeling. A sound from the connecting room. The prince, waking from his nap. Ronan's expression transformed into something softer, paternal. Come, he said, taking my hand. Meet him properly, as his guardian. We entered the nursery together. The prince, nearly 7 months old now, was standing in his cradle, chubby hands gripping the rail. When he saw me, his face split into a gummy smile. I approached slowly, and he reached for me immediately. When I picked him up, carefully, mindful of my healing shoulder, he buried his face in my neck with absolute trust. The bond thrummed between us, warm and unbreakable. He knows you, Ronan said quietly. Has since the beginning. I looked at this tiny person I'd saved twice, who'd somehow saved me in return. At the man standing beside me, no longer untouchable king, but just Ronan. Complicated and damaged and impossibly strong. What's his name? I asked. Realized I'd never known. Emrys. It means immortal. Ronan's hand rested on my lower back, a gesture of possession and protection. After everything, it seemed fitting. Emrys made a happy sound, grabbing a fistful of my pale hair. Through the window, I could see the compound below, the training yards where I'd bled and persevered, the halls where I'd been scorned and tested, the world that had never wanted me but couldn't deny me anymore. I'd come here bound by debt, marked by scars, expecting nothing. Instead, I'd found purpose, family, something that tasted remarkably like belonging. The road ahead would be brutal, I had no illusions about that. The enemy was still out there, plotting. The pack would resist. Sienna would scheme. Politics would crush, and complications would multiply. But standing in the firelight with Emrys in my arms, and Ronan's hand warm against my back, I felt something I'd never expected to feel. I felt like I'd come home, not to a place, not to a title or position, to people, to purpose, to the strange, fierce love that forms in the spaces between sacrifice and survival, the Lycan King's ward, the prince's guardian, the half-blood girl who'd taken 4 arrows and lived to tell about it. I was all of those things now, but more than that, more important than any title, I was Elena Thorne, and I was finally, impossibly, enough. 3 months later, the spring festival transformed the compound into something magical. Lanterns hung from every surface, music drifted through the courtyards, and even the most austere Lycans seemed touched by the celebration. I stood in the royal box, Emrys balanced on my hip as he watched the festivities with wide-eyed wonder. He was walking now, chattering in the nonsense language of toddlers, and the bond between us had only strengthened. 2 more attacks had been thwarted. Both times, I'd sensed the danger before anyone else. The council, grudgingly, had admitted I was invaluable. Even Garrett had started treating me with something approaching respect. Sienna had left the compound after a final vicious confrontation. Her father had withdrawn his support from the council, taking his southern packs with him. It had caused political ripples that were still settling, but we'd survived it. You look happy. Ronan appeared beside me, magnificent in formal dress, though he'd refused the crown for tonight. Content even. I am. I smiled up at him. Is that allowed? For you? Always. He leaned down, kissed me softly, ignoring the gasps and whispers from below. We'd stopped hiding weeks ago, stopped pretending the bond between us was purely political. Let them talk. Let them judge. I'd learned that the only opinions that mattered were the ones held by people I loved. Callum approached, grinning. The prince is demanding cake. Actually, demanding, with words that are almost words. I laughed, setting Emrys down so he could toddle over to his favorite guardian. After me, he loved Callum best. Ronan's arm slid around my waist, pulling me close. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being brave when I needed you to be. For loving my son. For he turned me to face him fully, for choosing to stay, even when leaving would have been easier. I thought of the girl I'd been, invisible, afraid, convinced her human blood made her worthless. Thought of everything I'd survived to become who I was now. Leaving was never really an option, I told him. Not after the first arrow, not after I understood what I was protecting. Below us, the festival continued. Above us, stars wheeled through an endless sky, and in that moment, surrounded by light and music and love hard-won, I understood something fundamental. Strength wasn't about perfection, wasn't about fitting into molds others created. Strength was choosing to stand when falling was easier, was loving when fear said to run, was believing you mattered when the whole world said you didn't. I'd taken 4 arrows protecting the Lycan King's son, but what happened after? The transformation, the love, the belonging, that was the real miracle. That was the story worth telling, and it was mine.